Hey, what's up guys and welcome back to Anime King. And today I'm going to be giving you part 1 of what if Naruto's personally trained by Kurama after leaving the village. Part 1 guys. If you enjoyed seeing one, see part 2 of it, go ahead and click that red subscribe button and become part of the Anime King family. And thank you for all of your help and your support. All links will be down in the description for you guys to enjoy. So go ahead and check out that and enjoy for yourself. And remember to stay tuned for the rest of what is coming your way over on Anime King 2 and Anime King 3. So sit back, relax, and I hope you guys enjoy. So yeah, without wasting any more time, what do you say we begin this new series? Begin the intro. Naruto was running. While this simple fact wasn't strange or uncommon, it was a reason why he was running that was interesting. He ran a lot, whether it was from training or from people that got annoyed by his recent pranks. Yes, he was well known for his ability to run. One time, he outrun a team of Onvus after placing itchy powder on their masks. But for some reason, he couldn't shake this mob that was following him at the moment that were filled with civilians. Maybe it was because he was tired. After all, it has been going on for the entire day. Even for a person like him, with almost unlimited stamina, it was difficult. Or maybe it was because the moment he turned another corner, there would be a whole new set of mob there. It seems that the entire population was leading him into a trap. He wouldn't put this past them. Years and years of his own life had taught him that almost everyone hated him. After all, he never lived an easy life. Far from it. From the earliest memories, adults were treating him at the orphanage like the mere thought of him was disgraceful and distasteful. If he wasn't ignored, he was insulted. If he wasn't insulted, he was shouted at. If he wasn't shouted at, he was beaten. Storekeepers threw him out of their shops. Vendors refused to sell him. They overpriced him many times. And people would kick and throw things at him on a daily basis. It was like he was some plague in their village. Today was October 10th, his birthday. Many 7-year-olds would be happy that today was their birthday, but Naruto wasn't at all. In fact, he fears birthday more than any other day on the calendar. It was strange. Except for his birthday, he wouldn't even know what the date was. But whenever his birthday came around, the villagers got worse. As on his birthday, the people would seek him out, hunting and cornering him like some fox. How ironic that their thought was, but he did not know that. Apart from his birthday, October 10th was known as the day when the 4th Hokage defeated the 9-tailed demon that would have burned the village to the ground otherwise. It sent the village into an uproar of drinking, partying, and the annual game of hunting Naruto and beating him within an inch of his life, hoping that he'd die before the Hokage found out. This is why Naruto was running. He really thought all of his troubles would be over when he entered the academy last year, but it was far from it. He thought they would finally see him and recognize him as a ninja, but none of them did. It kinda made things worse. Parents hated the idea that a wretch like him would be near their child. The sensei at the academy was no different from the village, always ignoring his questions, piling the workload on him, and marking his grade down for no reason. He even got terrible grade for attendance, despite he never missed a day of school. He tried to rise to the challenge, tried to overcome it by learning and training every free second that he had, but it was difficult. After all, he was stopped from entering the library. They fear him becoming intelligent. He tried anyway. He threw everything into training and studying. It wasn't like he had friends to take up his time anyway. The cold, hateful glare from the adults seemed to rub off a lot on their children. They couldn't help it because they saw their parents, their teachers, the people that they look up to, look at the demon back with so much hateful glares. So they started to act the same way towards him. Eventually, Naruto got the message as he isolated himself from the rest of his peers, as he knew if the kids were seen around him, their parents would probably even punish them for that. He never showed that though. He never showed how much pain he was in. He always put on a cheerful smile. He was Naruto, the boy who never frowned, always happy, always smiling. He stopped trying to make friends, pretend that he didn't need them, and he was always happy, but on the inside that was a complete lie. In fact, the only glimmer of hope in his life was Hokage. The old man would come to his apartment and visit him, and just talk to him. Naruto didn't really care if it was an act or guilt out of the way he was treated. For 1 hour out of every month, the Hokage would come over and treat him like an actual human being. They would talk about anything from his school life, his favorite food to his hobbies. Naruto had to make up a lot of what he said, just to give the old man a little hope. He was sure that if he told him that he had no hobbies, no friends, and the only food that he could really afford was the instant ramen cup, he would feel sad. But the Hokage hadn't come this month, and Naruto knew that the man was busy, being the Hokage and all. But it was so unlike him to miss out on their monthly meeting. Naruto tried to go see him himself, but the cruel receptionist kicked him out the moment he stepped foot in the tower. It was becoming more and more difficult to go on. He had to remind himself why he trained and pushed himself so hard. But some days it frightened him, because some days he couldn't answer that question, why he pushed himself so hard. He turned another corner only to be blocked, as 4 men was there, each of them holding on to a weapon. Desperately, Naruto scaled the side of the building. It took him a few seconds. By that time, people caught up and were throwing rocks at him from below. One clipped his shoulder. As it started to bleed, as he nearly lost his grip, he grabbed the ledge of the roof. As he pulled himself up and lay on his back, panting. It would only take a few minutes for his strength to come back to him. But he was given that time as he heard voices shouting far too close to him. The chase was on again as he jumped from rooftop to rooftop, dodging the rocks that the villagers threw. Unconsciously, he was making his way towards the North City gate. He realized that and diverted his path away. Last year, he tried to leave the village to run away from his pursuers, but he was pulled by the 2 Chunin guards while the villagers caught up, and he would be making that mistake again. He had tried to leave earlier, but only adults were allowed out of the village without permission. He couldn't sneak out either. The walls were being patrolled, and while he proclaimed to be a master of stealth, he wasn't any match for any Chunin. Not to mention his clothing was rather bright and easy to spot. Most of the time he stuck to his oversized white shirt with the village insignia on it, and that didn't help him blend into the shadows. It wasn't his fault, as the clothes were difficult to buy, seeing that shopkeepers charged him a ridiculous amount. So he knew how this day would end, the same way they always did. He would run away, but the villagers would find him. They would take their turn kicking and beating him until he had no tears left to cry, and there was no part of his skin left unbloody and unbruised. Then he would drag himself back to his apartment and lie until he fell unconscious. Each year he got faster and stronger, but in the end, it was only putting off the inevitable. No one could run forever, not even him. Eventually, he would trip or collapse from a strain, and the beating, it would begin. He only hoped that this year the people would show some restraint, but it was false, because every year they came at him like he was a devil in disguise. This year was no different. Meanwhile, Uncle strode across the rooftops. It was a way of getting to our destination without having to go through the festivities down below. It wasn't that she disliked anything down there, she just didn't want to get caught up. Her sensei called her, and it was always her priority to be on time. She was especially excited today. He had said something about an important mission, and he was going to take her to the land of sea. It was the farthest she was ever going to go on a mission before. She knew that Orochimaru sensei was all over the elemental nations, exploring, and she wanted to be just like him, to see everything. She stopped her pace when she heard something. She looked down from the rooftop that she landed on to see a group of people gathered down below in a large circle. Their combined gaze was looking at a boy. He looked to be 6 or 7. Uncle watched as they mercilessly kicked and pushed him, as some large man came forward and kicked the boy. There were bruises all across his body, and blood was staining his white shirt, as she didn't recognize his blonde hair and his whisker marks. Uncle was only 13 and a genin, but her sensei had seen fit to tell her about the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. She knew full well about the fourth sacrifice, and using his child as a sacrifice to contain the beast. He was a baby, and he had no choice in the matter. He should have been a hero for holding back the beast. Praise the hero like the fourth was. Instead, he was hunted down and beaten, called a monster, and he didn't even know why. Uncle had actually run into him before, as she was looking for a place to train while her sensei was out on difficult missions, as she knew she couldn't go on some of the difficult missions that her sensei went on. After all, he was a Sanin. She had came across him where he was reading through some scrolls and exercising his small body to exhaustion. She had merely watched, as she was surprised that someone so small and hated would push himself so hard to actually protect the people that want him gone or dead. She just couldn't understand. She never approached or talked to him. She never had the time with her training. She merely watched. And he was so young, just barely 5 years old back then. At that age, Uncle would even know what being a shinobi meant. And there was that boy, training himself to exhaustion to become one. She had to run off and continue her own training, but that symbol stayed with her as a dedication of her own training and strength. As her blood boiled as she looked down, as her fists clenched tight, she was about to intervene despite her earlier thoughts about getting to her sensei as soon as possible, when a squad of envoys landed across the roof from her. She sighed in relief, but they didn't move. They just stood there watching the kid get beaten. Finally, when it seems like he was going to actually die, they jumped in and dispersed the mob. The mob may have hated Naruto, but they weren't going to mess with the powerful envoy members. She watches the envoys wait till the civilians were gone. Then they simply walked away, leaving the broken boy in the middle of the street, as if their sole responsibility was to make sure that he did not die. It was like they were under no obligation to lift a finger further. She couldn't leave him like that. As she jumped down, the small pool of blood around him and his torn up body, she wondered if he was in fact dead, but he released a breath. She slowly picked him up, not caring about the blood that stained on her, as she walked off with him. She didn't know where he lived, but when she placed him down to ask the young man, she was excitedly told, as the man think that she was going to go over there to trash the apartment. She was disgusted by his encounter. As she arrived, she saw his home. Rubbish were everywhere. All the windows were smashed open. It was the kind of place that someone would live in, if the alternative was a cardboard box outside. She gently lay him down in the bed. The whole place revolted her, and she looked sadly at the young kid that had to live with it. She hoped that he would see his dream come through to be a shinobi, for him to at least receive some money to get better living conditions. She looked at him one last time, before going through the window and headed off, trying to make up the lost time to make her way to her sensei. Time skip. As Naruto awoke, he slowly looked down at the dry blood, but as usual, there wasn't a single scratch on his body. He had a fast healing factor that saved him from the scars that would appear if he didn't have the healing factor. As he pulled himself out of bed, he didn't know why everyone hated him, and the fact that he healed from their beatings overnight seemed to make them even angrier. He recently read about something called a Kekigenkai and he wondered if this was his. Heal fast. He sighed. He was an orphan he would never find out, and the Hokage was tight-lipped when he asked him about his parents, so he didn't know about this strange ability. He dragged his feet across the floor, knocking across the empty ramen cup as he did so. He may have the ability to heal, but the memories and the pain, as he looked at his stomach where there should be a nasty gash from a sharp piece of pipe, as he dragged himself into the shower, as he stood under the freezing water until the last bit of dry blood was washed away. If it wasn't for the water, you'd have seen that he was crying, as the water simply flowed down with the tears, mixing together. He got out of the shower and dried himself, not even bothered to comb his hair down. He threw on the last white shirt that he had and a pair of olive shorts, as he moved out to the main area of his home. As he decided to check on the damages there, the windows were all smashed in, letting the chilly morning air into the apartment. Graffiti covered the wall, some of it new, but the majority of it old, as it was a kunai driven into the wall. He was going to get help from his landlord for this, despite other people destroying his apartment. He was always blamed, usually in the form of raised rent. As he sank down into his lumpy couch, the new tears already streaming down his face. He had pulled the kunai out of the wall and he was now looking at it, as he considered the weapon, how easy it would be to just slide across his throat and end his suffering, end his pain and suffering once and for all, and he may even see his parents, as he raised it to his neck, nicking his skin. As the tiny cut started to heal already, tears started to stream across his face as he pulled the kunai back. He started slowly moving towards his neck, but he dropped it as a loud voice boomed in his head. "I can't let you do that, kid. I think it's time that we talk." As Naruto started to fall, as his mind started to be pulled away into his subconscious, Naruto woke up. It was confused. He just was wide awake a moment ago. So what happened? He was confused as he rolled over. What surprised him, he didn't see his wallpaper or his torn ceiling. He slowly got to his knees and then up to his feet as he looked around. He seemed to be in some sort of sewer. Corridors led off in every direction, and dripping water could be heard all around. It wasn't the Konoha sewers. He knew that because he spent his time hiding in them. This place was new, but yet at the same time he felt this strange familiarity with the place for some reason. As Naruto then finally realized why it was so strange, he couldn't smell anything. He was in a sewer, yet he couldn't smell anything. Not even as he tried to smell his own arm, but nothing. It was the strangest thing as he wondered if he lost his sense of smell. As he frantically looked around, something caught his eye. He turned slowly to look at the corridor that captured his attention. It was unremarkable like the rest of the passageway leading off, but this one felt strange for some reason. As he was drawn to it, he wondered if he was under the influence of a genjutsu. He had only read about genjutsu, so he had nothing to compare it to. But it was just as Naruto started to slowly make his way down the pathway, as he saw long red pipes going down, as he then saw an open way. Stepping inside, Naruto saw a massive steel gate. It was like a giant wall. Nothing but darkness stretching off, going straight down. As he realized how he was seen, as Naruto glanced, light was here despite there being no light source around. But suddenly, bright orange flames lit up behind the gate. He watched in trance as a large set of eyes and grinning mouth looked down at him. He knew he should have been afraid by such a sight. It was like a literal demon standing there. Instead, he was just curious. What was a demon doing here? Why was he behind bars? And why was he drawn to it in the first place? And the question that plagued him since waking up, what the hell is this place? Impressive, kid. Not many can stand before me without trembling in fear. Yet you stand completely unfazed. Who are you? Said Naruto, as he looked at the massive thing in front of him. I am the Kyuubi no Yoko. In your tongue, the nine-tailed fox. Naruto blinked. One of the Biju, the beast said. Naruto still continued to stare. The thing sighed. You know the human called the Fourth Hokage, correct? Naruto nodded slowly. Of course he knew the Fourth Hokage. The hero of the Hidden Leaf. The most powerful ninja to ever be born in the Hidden Leaf. He sealed me inside of you on the day you were born in order to contain my power, the Kyuubi said. Leaving out the part that it was on a rampage. Well, it wasn't his fault, so he didn't feel like it was worth mentioning. Are you the reason why I healed so quickly? The fox wasn't expecting that at all. He wasn't expecting that question. He thought the kid would be curious about the seal and what exactly was going on, but not that. Yes, that's a side effect of me being sealed inside of your body. Naruto looked down as he sighed. Could you stop it? He asked. Now the fox was completely off guard by that question. What? Why? Why would you not want to heal away your injuries as fast as possible? The Kyuubi was century-old. He was known for his wisdom, his age being so great than any other mortal. After all, he was a beast of power. But this single mortal just piqued his curiosity. As Naruto let his head tilted down, the fox saw tears dripping from his eyes. As he then lifted his face slowly, because I just want to die. The demon narrowed his eyes. It was so unlike his container to give up. He may have disliked the boy at first, but he has lived so long and seen so many people, and this boy, through it all, always never gave up. For to see a person like him reach the end of his rope. The fox then suddenly started to shrink as the chakra started to take shape. Soon, it lowered itself to about the size of a Rottweiler with deep orange fur. 9 elegant tails flew behind it as a fox stepped out from behind the bars. As it did so, glowing blue threads came around its neck. Tell me, why do you wish to die, human? Its voice lost all that androgynous quality. It became more feminine and soft. Wait, you're a girl? Said Naruto. The Kyuubi rolled her eyes at the question. With everything going on, the child was curious about her gender. What does that change? Naruto shrugged, nodding at the fox's logic. Now tell me, why do you wish to die? She asked, as she gracefully walked forward and sat right in front of him, her head cocked to the side. Naruto also sat down and wrapped his knees up in his arms. I had enough. I can't take anymore. The pain, the loneliness, the hate. And what makes you believe that taking your own life is the answer? The fox said curiously. It wasn't a mocking tone or anything, just curiosity. For a creature that was immortal, death was a mystery to her, even more than humanity. I don't know, said Naruto, but I don't have to feel pain anymore, and I might even get to see my parents. The Kyuubi nodded. It took courage to admit that you didn't know why you were doing something. Of course she knew even if there was an afterlife, the boy would never see his father. Having used the Reaper Dead Seal, cemented that man as a Shinigami plaything. She sighed. Of all the humans that she knew, Minato Namikaze had been a worthy foe, and been sealed inside his wife for a number of years. She saw that he was a worthy and strong human. So, to get away from what the village did to you, You wish to get rid of your pain by ending your life. Naruto nodded. Then, why not simply leave? Naruto looked up like he was about to retort, but I don't know, he says. He lowered his head. He genuinely didn't know. The thought of leaving the village didn't cross his mind. Wouldn't that make me a coward? She huffed, leaving behind suffering and pain to find happiness and acceptance. That is not cowardly. How would I even leave? Where would I go? She smiled. For too long she had endured the second-hand pain from the villagers, the beating that was given to her container. He was technically her mortal form, seeing as she was sealed inside him, and his experience were hers by proxy. Don't worry, kid. That is the easy part, she said. The two talked long into the night, until she finally let him go. As Naruto smiled, he was scratching her behind the ear. In the last part of the conversation, something that she didn't mind. When he removed said hand, she looked up disappointedly. Kyuubi? It wasn't her name, but she let it slide, seeing that he couldn't really pronounce her Vulcan name, even if he tried. Yes, kid. How do I, leave? Said Naruto, as he felt a bit embarrassed. He didn't want to look stupid. That is entirely up to you, kid. This is your mind after all. Wait, what? The Kyuubi chuckled. It sounded rather strange coming from the fox. This is your mindscape, a visual representation of your mind, subconscious, given form, and solidity. Naruto's face was completely blank. I have to keep reminding myself that you're only 7. 7.5, said Naruto. She couldn't help the slight grin and laughter that came from her. He was just so adorable. Alright, kid, like I was saying, this is what your brain. You still with me? He nodded. Tell your mind to look like, she said. He still didn't get it. Alright, imagine a chair over there, she said. Giving her a glance, she just nodded. As he pictured a chair where she was pointing. When he opened his eyes, it was what he thought of. A comfy chair right there. It was not just any chair though. As he rushed over and jumped on the chair, as he spun himself in it. This is awesome, he said. I've always wanted to sit in Hokage's chair, but he told me if I want to, I had to work really hard to earn it. Naruto then realized that he sat in the old man's chair without permission. The Kyuubi caught on to that. I wouldn't worry about it, kid. It isn't really Sarutobi's chair. It's just a figment of your imagination. She realized once again she used long words, as he had that dumb look on his face. So like that chair, all you have to do is imagine yourself waking up and you will. As he closed his eyes to imagine himself awake. Wait, kid. One last request before you go. Naruto opened back his eyes. As you might have known this place. As she looked around, it's a bit dank for my taste. Could you possibly do something about it? As Naruto thought about everything he knew about foxes, which was really limited, he guessed her a while. He got that from her attitude, her dislike of cages. The only wild place he knew were the forests, and the ones around Konoha was the only one that he knew. He thought about the rivers from the hot springs, as he also included the training grounds. He knew that she wouldn't like the buildings or the ramen stands. As he finally opened back his eyes, he looked around in wonder, so did the Kyuubi, as a vast forest had now surrounded the pair, as they were in Naruto's favorite clearing that used for training, as he could even see the cut marks in the tree. He was amazed how accurate the picture of his mind was, and wondered how far it went. He was about to turn to the Kyuubi and ask her what she think, but when he turned he saw her chasing a rabbit. Naruto chuckled for a moment at the odd sight, but she seemed satisfied, maybe even happy. So he decided to wake himself, as he forced himself to imagine his apartment, as he felt a strange feeling of rising this time instead of falling. As he woke up, despite knowing that he wasn't asleep a moment ago. As he looked around, he had collapsed on the floor, and the kunai knife was at his feet. He picked it up and put it in his pocket. Despite a few hours ago, he was about to kill himself with it. He would have thrown it out the window, but they were rather expensive. He then looked out the window. Huh? He was confused. He was sure that it was some hours spent in talking to the Kyuubi, but it seems like no time had passed. Wherever he went, it seems like the time was different there. Mindscape, kid. Naruto jumped back as he looked around, with a voice so soft and feminine. Kyuubi, you're in my head. She sighed. I would recommend that you don't shout so loud every time I communicate with you. People think that you're crazy. Just think what you wish to say, and I will hear it. Naruto's a bit startled by that. So, you can read my thoughts? Yes, I have done that ever since I was sealed inside you. Now if we're done here, I nearly caught that rabbit. He left her be. Now a bit, weirded out that she could read every one of his thoughts. But he supposed nothing was wrong with that. She was inside him after all. As he started to gather up his supplies, there were a few things that he still needed and didn't have, so he would have to go out. Lucky it was Sunday. and he had no school, so he jumped across rooftop to rooftop, making his way to the food district. He remembered this exercise as he tried to clear his mind, but she merely chuckled. He wasn't doing a good job, as she had told him to get some items as he looked around the place. Easily affordable, long-lasting food. Before he could even suggest it, she shot it down. No, instant ramen. That was practically all he eat for the 7 years he was on this earth for. He collected what he can with the money he had and walked around the area, as he took in the village for the very last time, because he wasn't going to stay here anymore. He walked past a place that used to sell octopus balls, but it was closed up. There was a sign there, saying Ichiraku Ramen coming soon, but he simply shrugged. There were a few ramen places in Konoha. There was nothing to say that this one would be any special. As he walked past the food district, reached into the academy and simply stared at the building. As there was a girl in his class, her name was Sakura. He had a crush on her. He guessed he would have to forget about them all though, if he was going to move on. Yes kid, it would be best if you cut all ties to your past here. It will make it easier for you to find a new and better life. Naruto jumped a bit, still unused to this. Would you please stop scaring me like that? She simply chuckled as she returned back to what she was doing, as he just stopped thinking about them anymore. His friends, that he claimed to call them his friends in the academy, may have been hard to forget, but for his teachers, that was easy. They didn't teach him anything. They always hated him. As he came to the final stop, the Hokage's tower, as he climbed up the side until he made his way to the roof. There was no point going in. While he would have liked to see the old man one last time, he knew that the receptionist wouldn't even let him touch the door if she could. He sighed as he thought it was for the best. The Kyuubi had told him to cut all ties, and this was the best. The Hokage made hold a special place in his heart, and he couldn't afford to see him now, as he couldn't make it influence his thoughts to not leave. He peacefully sat back as he looked at Hokage's monument. Before the place became dark, he considered going out with a bang to remind the villagers who were leaving them, but after some berating by the Kyuubi and some reconsideration, he decided not to do it. Something large and obvious wouldn't help him sneak out of the village, and he knew that it was just his old self that was just acting out. The pranks had just been a way for them to notice him, but know that he didn't have to work for their approval anymore. He didn't have to, well, really let them notice him. It was almost a relief, like some large weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as he made his way back to his apartment where his gear was laid out on his bed, ready to be packed away. Time skip, it was dark when he set off. The sun had set hours ago, and the remnants of the daylight started to fade away. It helped that there were thick clouds in the sky, and the moonlight was barely shining down. He stuck to the shadows, as he didn't want to get caught by a Anvu or Shinobi patrol, as he couldn't use his chakra even if he could have, effectively. Any burst of unknown chakra would alert any nearby chunin. That meant no transformation. Well, it wouldn't make a difference though, as Naruto was just in the first year of the academy. He barely knew anything. Before he made his way though, he had one last thing to do, but the Kyuubi had warned him against not to. For once he ignored his new friend though. This was just something he had to. She may have wanted him to cut all ties to his life here, but he couldn't leave without one thing first. It also satisfied his need to pull one last prank. Time skip, as Naruto left the academy with a smile on his face, and with that he silently moved around the village. It was simpler than he imagined. As long as he didn't use any chakra the Kyuubi told him, and suppress it as best as he could, he wasn't interrupted by any guards. After one survey of the village walls, he was ready, as he was a few buildings away from the west gate, observing chunin guards. He hoped that two of them might have dozed off to make his plan easier, but he was in no such luck. Both of them looked alert and ready, but most of their training was directed outwards. After all, they were to stop anyone from imposing. They weren't relied on to take care of internal threats. But the Kyuubi told him what to do, to leave. Alright Kyuubi, I've done everything you asked so far. So what now? Inside of his mind she grinned, as she has saw him done everything, and perform everything with true skills, unlike an academy student. Of course she was guiding him, but he still showed what a remarkable ninja he could become someday. With her help, she would make sure that day was soon, as there was no need to have a weak container after all. At least that was what she told herself. Good job kid. Now, make the hand sign I'm showing you in your head. But I can't do any ninjutsu. Why am I making hand signs, Naruto? She sighed. She had to explain everything to the young boy. Don't worry about that, you just made the hand sign to focus the chakra, and I'll do the rest. As Naruto did what she told him, as he saw the hand signs, he felt a strange presence run through his body. It felt strange. He then heard a loud crack fill the air, as he had placed explosive tags on the village wall, as it detonated. He hoped it worked properly. He had followed Kyuubi's instructions down to the letter, and he hoped he didn't mess up. It was putting his chakra into the paper that was the real hard part though. At least from the sound of it, it had worked though, as it would serve to be a distraction. It wasn't anything really powerful, but it will distract them. as one of them moved off, leaving his companion. It was exactly how the Kyuubi thought he would act. Textbook strategy. After all, she had millennia of knowledge in them. And if they had come up with something else, she would have outmaneuvered them. But there wasn't one distraction. Naruto made the hand sign again and he felt the pulse of energy, the strange one, run through him again. He had felt the effects of using chakra already, and it wasn't this. This time, a larger burst went off all around them. All of the tags that he placed started to detonate one by one. The guard at the gate moved away, leaving the gate wide open, as Naruto wasted no time and rushed forward, rushing through the gate, until he was a full 100 meters away, where he stopped and panted on a tree. Even if the village knew that he was leaving, there was no telling where he would have gone. The placement of the tags going off around the village. They saw to that, as he walked away from the village, as the village walls disappeared into the darkness of the night, intending to make his own way and his own path. As you remember talking to the Kyuubi about this. Flashback. So kid, you won't leave the village. Where do you intend to go? What do you mean, said Naruto. I mean, where are we gonna go after we leave the village? Naruto blushed a bit at that, as she said we, as he was happy that he had her with him at the moment. But he had no idea. She saw the look on his face. You have no idea, don't you? He simply shrugged. I guess I can help you out. You still wish to be a shinobi, do you not? Naruto nodded. Then I would recommend one of the other hidden villages. As Naruto looked at her, she swore she would have to get this kid more educated so she could keep her sanity in check. Yes, Naruto, there are other hidden villages, she said. Did you really think there was only one in the elemental nation? He nodded. She shook her head. Well, she couldn't blame him. It was the school system that didn't teach him much. Alright, more specifically now, the 5 major villages are Leaf, Rock, Mist, Cloud, and Sand. Naruto thought about that. Village hidden in the rocks? She nodded. She really hoped he wasn't thinking for that one. Of all the enemies that his father made, the hidden rock was the worst. That sounds uncomfortable, said Naruto. I couldn't agree with you more, kid, she said. He smiled, as he was happy that she agreed on his choice. It was still strange to have a friend. The mist sounded too wet. She agreed she hated water, and he made her first stick out. If that is her objection, I recommend you avoid Cloud as well. Naruto looked a bit disappointed. He was thinking about the Cloud, because it sounded more interesting, as he wondered how can you put a village on a cloud. He wasn't that naive to believe that the names were literal. But he still couldn't help it but wonder. What do you mean, Naruto asked? Well, clouds are like water in the sky. Naruto looked even more confused. The clouds didn't seem like water. He couldn't see through them. Perhaps that isn't the best way to put it. She looked around, searching for some inspiration to explain. Your kettle. You know how it steams, right? He had enough experience with that because of the instant ramen, as he nodded. That is because the very hot water come out and cool quickly. Clouds are like that, but high in the sky. He remembered one of the boys in his class being entranced by the clouds. He could understand the logic, but he just, well, couldn't put the science behind it. Naruto just nodded. Well, clouds are just like that, she said. Water, rain come from them. Anyway, it seems by elimination you have chose your destination. Huh? But I haven't chose yet, said Naruto. There are only 5 villages. You have left one and don't like the others that only leave the Sand Village. She was satisfied with the choice. She would have been happy with anything Naruto picked. Well, except the hidden stone. But this seemed the best. And it's not like the sand really affected her. After all, she was stuck inside here. She should perhaps get Naruto to do something about that. Kyuubi? She was broken from her internal monologue. Yes, kid, she said. What's a sand? Naruto asked. The Kyuubi lowered her head, as she just placed her tails over her face. This was going to be a really long night. End of flashback. As Naruto was happy with his destination with Kyuubi, had the perfect knowledge of the elemental nation, she was his guide. He couldn't tree hop yet, so he had to walk. He didn't mind all that much. It was a nice brisk walk, and he had some time for the village knew that he was gone, before they started to track him. What he didn't notice was the set of pale lavender eyes that followed him. Earlier, Hinata had loved night like these. The cloudy skies always seemed to hide her from everything. When she started the academy, her father started to show a bit more kindness to her. He probably thought that she would take her training different and serious, and become the heiress like he wanted. She did take her training seriously. She had activated her Keiki Genkai when she was 5. She had saw her father show true emotion back to her back then. She made her way out in the foliage. It was night like these that she came out here, as the dark sky seemed to just hide her from all of her problems, as she always came to get some training in as well. It was because of that training she saw her crush, retreating back as she had her gun activated. She had only known him for 6 months. Before that, his status, his tone. Problem child kept him away from children his age. Even then, she saw him around, mistreated by the villagers for reasons she could not understand. When she asked her father about it, he told her to forget about him and focus on her training. But that only made her curious. Then school year started and she saw how he behaved. He was like a role model to her. No matter what life threw at him, he would always pick himself back up and dive back in. They were like complete opposites. He was loud, while she was shy, and always thinking to herself, and he was always outgoing. For some reason she became flustered and embarrassed whenever he was near to her. She couldn't even talk properly. If anyone else had noticed that, they would have known that she had a crush on him. But she was just 7. She didn't really grasp that concept yet. She saw him walking away from the village, suppressing his chakra signature. So she decided to follow to see what was going on. As she saw that he was not slowing down, he was not stopping. As she wondered how he got out of the village so late, permission was only granted to shinobis and adults. She was only allowed to leave because no one would question the heiress to the most prestigious family, after the Uchiha, of course. She started to get worried as she noticed a backpack and the dark clothes that he was wearing. He couldn't be leaving, could he? No. Naruto would never run away from anything, but he was getting further and further as she thought. She wanted to call out and stop him and say something, but her voice just wouldn't come. She then saw him stop as she was looking through the bushes at him. He then turned slowly. Hello? That was impossible. She hid herself well. She wasn't hiding her chakra, but he couldn't detect her because of that. She didn't have a strong chakra signature to begin with, and only a Jonin would pick it up. Even so, he was looking at her. He must know someone was there, but he didn't know who. She knew that he would investigate. She stepped out of the bushes into the weak light. Hey, you're the girl from my class. Hinata. Oh, hi Naruto, she said, as she pressed her fingers together. He tried to make eye contact, but her eyes were just moving around quickly. He was wondering what she was doing at the village, so far, so late. He see her a few times in his class, but he didn't talk to her. She was shy and weird. Hinata, what are you doing out here? He needed to hurry the conversation along before the shinobis or envoy would catch his trail. Oh, I was training, she said. Naruto thought that he was the only one that trained out of school time, but it seems like there was others as well. Why are you out here, she asked. What are you doing? He gulped, not sure whether to tell the truth or not. And he hadn't known her long enough to know whether they could trust her or not. In that split second, he figured that it wouldn't matter, seeing that he was leaving. I'm leaving the village, he said. Her eyes widened. It looked rather strange with her already large eyes. All the contents was drained out of her with that statement, and her whole world shook. Naruto was giving up. The silence became rather awkward, but she spoke once again. But why? I need a change of scenery, he said, with a smirk on his face, as he placed on back that mask once again. But he saw the look on her face, so he just dropped it. I have my reasons, Hinata, he said, rather seriously. She nodded, as she was used to nodding when her father talked to her in that serious tone, so she did. She saw the way he was treating her in the village. She thought it was because of something he did in the past, or because of his pranks. She never actually knew why. Where are you going, she said. Naruto was about to answer the question before the Kyuubi voice rang out in his head. Stop! You can't tell anybody where you're going. They will track you and bring you back. As Naruto realized that she was right. Sorry, but I can't tell you that, Hinata, he said. Are you ever coming back? What the hell was wrong with her? She should tell him to stay, to come back before he got in trouble. Technically though, he was an academy student, not a shinobi, so he wouldn't become missing in, but he would be in trouble. I don't know. The answer was completely honest. Naruto had no idea. The whole point was to go and make his life somewhere new. If someday he could return, he, wouldn't mind, but he had to change up things first. As the conversation pained him, reminding him about the village. After all, it wasn't always bad there. But still, it was mostly bad. It's gonna be alright, kid. I promise, said the Kyuubi. With the kind words, he mentally smiled. His first true friend after the Hokage. As Naruto saw Hinata just flicking down towards the ground, her eyesight looking at him and looking back down. He then turned to walk, but she grabbed his hand. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He pulled his hand away and started to walk away again. As she watched him walk away, her shyness overtaking her as she broke down. Naruto, it came out as a squeak. It might have been mistaken for the wind. Time skip, the conversation with her had slowed him down, but her words brought up some good feeling within him. As he was moving, the veil of sleep was already descending over his eyes. After all, he was still a 7-year-old boy. And it was dark, he could barely see 20 feet ahead of him. At 10, it was too bulky to lug around. His small body was not yet ready to carry heavy loads. The best he could do was climb a tree and pull a blanket over himself, and secure himself tightly with a length of rope. He did this, what he did with his shirt, when the villagers were chasing him sometime, as he hid in a tree. With some calming word from his tenant inside, he was able to fall asleep. Back at the village, Hinata stared at the wall. As her mind was lost in her thoughts, he left. That was the only thing on her mind right now. The very reason why she started to notice him and admire him was because he refused to give up. Even to the point of idiocy. He never stopped, no matter what. Everything life threw at him, he hold on to it and smile. As she cursed herself for being so shy, unwilling to help him, unwilling to act. Maybe if she was stronger, maybe if she said something or did something, then this wouldn't be happening. It was her fault and she truly believed that. As she thought of him, if it was him there, he would have done something to convince her to return with him. He would have just did something, but she was unable to do anything. And he's gone. She broke down and she started to cry. She thanked the protective seal on her wall to prevent her father from looking through and seeing her in this state. He would have berated or punished her, calling her unfit and weak. But through that pain, a bright beacon erupted. She had to get stronger. She had to be more determined. Against all odds, she knew that she would have to get stronger. She had. To make herself stronger, she couldn't afford to stay weak anymore. As she ended up falling asleep, her mind now fully made up and determined. Time skip. Naruto woke up the next morning, as he was still tied to the tree. He bathed and nearby screamed, the cold water not affecting him. He was so used to it. As he got back out and placed on his boxers, as he got started on his breakfast, still feel weird to not have ramen the first thing in the morning. After that, he placed back on his clothes and kept on walking down the path, as he heard a yawn in his head. Morning, Kyube. He heard another yawn. What time is it? Naruto looked up in the sky. Around 7. He heard a growl. A small one. Why in the world would you wake up this early? Naruto remembered that he has gotten up as early as possible. For as long as he could remember, it was just his morning routine. He shrugged. She understood the gesture, even though he didn't say anything. He heard more mumble complaints before she woke up properly. We need to get you on a new schedule. We foxes are nocturnal creatures, and it will suit you better to move in the night. But I can't see in the dark. Naruto heard her chuckle a bit. Don't worry about that. She left her statement hanging. She didn't bother to explain, and Naruto did not ask, knowing that she would tell him when she was ready. It was strange that he barely knew her, but he felt a bond between him and her. As Naruto continued to walk, until the trees became more thicker, the foliage more dense, this forest was unknown to Naruto. Yes, this will do. Stop here, kid, and move into the forest and left for a bit. You will know when to stop. Knowing that she was older and wiser, Naruto moved off the road and walked into the thick bushes. It was peaceful and he enjoyed the sounds of the wildlife around him. Eventually walked into a clearing. The trees surrounded like a thick perimeter wall, with a stream to the side. This one patch of ground seemed sacred for some reason. He felt like this was what she meant when she said he would know when to stop. Perfect. This will suit you excellently, she said. Now kid, I assume that you still wish to become a shinobi, and a powerful one at that, right? Of course, said Naruto then. He earned a chuckle from her for his enthusiasm. Good, because starting from now, I'll be your teacher. Naruto's eyes widened. He couldn't believe his luck. He had teachers before, but they disliked him. But now he had a powerful teacher, who was also his friend. I warn you kid, I'm a thorough teacher. I have ways of ensuring your cooperation. Her tone became a bit menacing. It made Naruto gulp. It didn't lighten up though. Of course, the benefits that you will reap would be great. Naruto smiled. That was exactly what he wanted after all. All you must do is accept. Naruto immediately nodded, not even thinking it through beforehand. No kid, I must hear you say it. As Naruto calmed himself. I accept you as my sensei, Kyube, he said, as he heard her laugh. Excellent. Now then, let us begin. And that was the last thing he heard as pain shot through his head and he blacked out. Time skip. Hours later, he knew that hours had passed, seeing that the sun had set now. As his eyes were closed, and he was rubbing the side of his head from the headache. After some time, it died down to a light headache, as he slowly opened his eyes. Amazingly, when he looked around, he could have sworn that it was early morning. From a late hour, he knew it was. Everything was more lightened. The colors were even brighter. It's supposed to be dark. He wasn't sure how he knew that it was dark, but he just did. He then heard a light chuckle. Now this is a more appropriate time to wake up. Don't you think, kid? Naruto was at a loss for words. The Kyuubi simply laughed. So, are you enjoying your upgrade? What did you do to me? What? Don't you like it, she said, as she put on a mock, hurt voice. No, said Naruto. I didn't say that. I just want to know what did you do. Oh, in that case then, it's okay. I just messed about with your senses a bit. Naruto gulped at that. An ancient demon playing with his senses, like he was a machinery or something. Wait a second, senses? Of course. Why would I only improve your sight when I can open a whole new world of feeling for you? Smell, taste, hearing. But my hearing isn't any better, said Naruto. He could hear the birds and the rustling of the trees, but it was the same way as when he passed out. Of course not. The sensory overload from all four senses being tuned might have knocked you out again. It was only because sight was your main reliance. I was able to bring all changes to the forefront, including your new ability to see better in the dark. So what does that mean for my hearing? She wondered why he was so fixated on hearing, after she told him that all of his senses will improve. They will improve slowly. You will start to notice them by the end of tomorrow. And by the end of the month, you will start to get adapted to all of them, and get used to your new abilities and use them effectively. Naruto nodded, a bit excited at that. Anyway, I didn't just bring you here for the scenery. I think it would be best to begin your training as soon as possible. Naruto nodded as he agreed. Now kid, tell me everything you know about chakra. Time skip. She had to correct a great deal of Naruto knowledge about many things, not just about chakra. They cover all the basics, ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. He had shown no interest in the genjutsu, thinking that it was worthless in combat. She would have to remove that mentality from him. She tried to make everything sound as interesting as possible, as she didn't want to lose his interest. It was working as he sat there, soaking in all of the knowledge that she was teaching him. He just needed a proper teacher that would focus on him. She had to hammer in the point that chakra control was as good as using the chakra. After a long session, he finally settled down for the night, and she was left with her own devices inside his head. As ever since he created the mindscape, it took her a while to realize that the place was one massive loop. She would run in one place for a long time and then end up at the same place that she started. Should be proud of creating something so quickly. He would know that he did something great because villagers had beat any self-praise out of the boy. But it didn't matter, he was finally out of that damn village. As she thought about how she was going to train him, chakra control would be easy. She would set him a task, make him go on his own, and then go to the next stage. She was going to have to find a human trainer for him as well. After all, there was a limit which she could offer him when it came to actual jutsu. But it didn't matter to dwell about such thoughts for now. They had time. They were on the road, open and free. With those thoughts, she drifted off into her own sleep. She was going to wake him up when it was midnight, to get him to adjust to a darker schedule than early morning. Time skip. The next week was very strange for Naruto. Training under Kyuubi was nothing like he ever expected. It was long and difficult, and all the time they had to stop to do the exercises cut into his traveling time. She kept assuring him that they were in no rush. Her training was brutal, especially for his young body. From the moment she had him woke up, he would be doing physical exercises. She didn't want to impede his growth, so there was nothing too difficult that his body could handle. But still, he was, well, exhausted every single night. But his speed and strength had started to show. After a light lunch, he started to focus on chakra control. She had told him that he had to climb trees without his hands, but that sounds strange to him. But he continued to work on chakra control exercise. The one he hated the most was leaf exercise. He would burn the center of a leaf, and the Kyuubi was told him to stop the burning of the leaf. It was tired, difficult, and he burned his hand many times. But he always felt so happy when she motivated him, saying that he did well, and he moved on to the next step, as it made him jump and leap and bounce, knowing that someone was there to congratulate him. And after that he went to his mindscape, and she teach him everything from geography, from tactics, and he soaked everything up like a sponge, as she made everything sound so fascinating. I know he had a different sleeping schedule. He always sleep in the daytime and move in the night. With his new sense of sight, navigating through the forest was easy at night. She wasn't lying when she said that he would notice the changes to his other senses soon. The very morning he woke up, he smelled a rabbit running off from where it was napping. He had the strangest urge to run after it, but he controlled himself when his body woke up to his mind. The hearing was the one that took most getting used to though. Every bird call and cicada nearly driving me insane, as it took him a while to get used to it, tying a cloth around his head. After a while though, he saw the benefits, as he could hear every single soft footstep on the ground, everything. And his sense of smell had increased. Waking up in the morning to his own sweat was a bit, well, not pleasant, as he started to wash before going to sleep because his training was so intense that he sweat a lot. He didn't have a lot of money, but now that he was beginning to hunt, food wasn't an issue anymore, so he can spend the money that he had on different things. Clothes, he was lacking that. While could always wash himself of any sense, clothes were different. Cold water just wouldn't cut it, as he could start to smell his shirts. He only had 2 of them. The Kyuubi knew of this as she started leading to a village. Her information was several years out of date, but she remembered that he was there, so she led him to the place. as he broke out of the forest onto a dense road. He was in a really good mood, not really looking around his surroundings. After all, she had deemed him worthy of going on to the next path, tree walking, as his senses were not on full alert. If they had been, he would have been able to smell his 3 followers before they got close enough. But they burst out of the bushes. He could smell the scent of sweat, metal, and another one that he couldn't place. Well, looky here, boys. We got a runt all out on his own. As Naruto turned, 3 rather tall men stood in front of him, all of them smirking. But guys, if you end up right here, if what's next part of this one to do, like, subscribe, comment down below, and turn on that bell notification to stay posted. But I'm over now, see you guys soon. Peace.